Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Amrit Chaudhary, CEO of Smart Labs. Thanks for joining us at 7:45 in the morning for this panel. We're excited to have you here. We have a wonderful group of people here with us today. We have Devonit Shah from Garuda Therapeutics, CEO. We have Raphael Ognar from Enkilt Therapeutics. And we have Joanna Smith-Farrell from biopharma. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you for having us.
What would be useful is maybe talking a little bit about your own backgrounds and paths to being an executive in this field and how you got to where you are today. So maybe Devonit, if you want to start.
Sure. So before becoming CEO of Garuda Therapeutics, I was a professor of medicine at Harvard. And one thing we learned in Harvard is they don't pay your salary. So you eat what you kill. So you go around, raise money every day, you pay for yourself and pay for your people. So that discipline has been very helpful. I hated every moment being there. I love every moment being there now. So it's been very helpful since then. And we took that discovery we made in my former lab to Garuda Therapeutics. We have built the company quite strong over the last 2.5 years. We raised $135 million in Series A and Series B funding. We are one of very few lucky winners of the game this year who were able to raise money. But it also comes with a lot of discipline around execution and financial frugality. So our hope is to deliver what we promised and loving the game.
Awesome. Raphael.
Yeah, so obviously coming from a very different background, I've been in this industry for 26 years now, spent most of it in large pharma. I'm a scientist, but I did all my career in commercial and strategy roles. I also had 5 very important years where I was leading pipeline programs when I was working at Novartis Oncology. And actually that specific job planted the seed in my mind about, one day eventually creating my own biotech and trying to bring a drug from beginning to end. So when we created Enkilt, with my co-founders a couple of years ago, we actually went the hardest possible way you would think is creating our own technology, spending the first 8 months writing the IP about what we wanted to develop. And I would say the main outcome of that is you realize that choosing your partners is critical. And I had the chance of having 2 extraordinary scientists that are complementary to each other and to me. And we have very nice dynamics. And the world of entrepreneurship is so different than large pharma. But I have to give credit to large pharma because everything I do today I learned over there. And so that was an incredible source of confidence that I gained through that. So that's a little bit how we arrived with Enkilt today.
Joanne?
Excellent. So I'm Joanne Smith-Farrell. I start out life as a scientist. So my doctorate's in physics, and I postdoced with Bob Langer in biomedical engineering, and crossed over into the world of business through the Boston Consulting Group. And from there, spent time both in biotech as well as large pharma. So for those of you who are old enough to remember it, I was a part of GeneLogic, which was a small publicly traded biotech, but also spent a good deal of time at Merck and at Pfizer. Mostly in senior roles of business development. And then really got my introduction to cell therapy at Bluebird. So at Bluebird, I led the oncology business. And I led it from the time it was a really small project in the middle of a big rare disease company to what it eventually became. And one of the things I am and probably always will be proudest of are some of the letters I've gotten from Abecma patients, whose lives are just fundamentally changed by what we do. Came to BeBio about 2.5 years ago. At BeBio, we are bold enough to ask the question, what if you could engineer a B cell to make any therapeutic protein you needed? And within the realm of B-cell biology, what that leads to is a portfolio of just transformative medicines that can be redosed. They are primarily allogeneic. They don't require preconditioning. And so we're inspired by the patients who are waiting for us in the clinic, and look forward actually to getting our first medicine into the clinic next year.
Well, on that note, maybe giving a background on each of these companies in terms of size, stage, where in that process you are, and how many people are at the company. I know it's different for all of you. Starting with you.
Sure, absolutely. So we are about 2.5 years old now. We have about 100 people in BBio and have raised $182 million to date, with just really great investors that I feel very privileged to be part of. We have 32,000 square feet of space, and that's in Kendall. We actually like coming into the office, and so it has not been hard to get people to return to the office at all. And in the space, not only do we have office and lab, but we also made a decision very early, like in the first year of the company, to build end-to-end manufacturing. And so we have all of the non-GMP as well as process and analytical development in-house. And then we put together a pretty creative deal with Resilience for our first several programs, and in that deal we have a couple of interesting features. One is that Resilience pays all of our manufacturing costs up through clinical proof of concept, and then secondly, we have a team at Resilience that is dedicated only to BBio programs, and those two features then have allowed us to just have a far more deeply collaborative relationship than any CDMO relationship I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, that's remarkably unique. I don't think I've seen a CDMO contract with those kind of
yeah,
terms.
It's been fantastic, and in the collaboration, I mean, they're fabulous partners.
That's fantastic. Rafael?
Yeah. So by the way, I confirm I'm starting conversations with them, and they're really great people. I'm just gonna say that. Enkilt is kind of way different, although it's a 2-year-old company. But as I mentioned, we created our own technology. So the first 8-9 months were really about writing this IP between the 3 co-founders. Today, Enkilt is a baby. We are 3 co-founders, 2 full-time scientists. I have a chief of staff that is helping me on things that I cannot do or that I don't have enough time to do, and that's about it. We really have the privilege of having a very nice incubator in Texas, in Houston, where we have our lab. It's called K2 Biolabs. Very, very good people. Infrastructure is top notch. And one of the benefits of Houston is that it's significantly cheaper than the East or West Coast. There's a small ecosystem over there. I think it needs to grow, but we actually want to try to be part of helping growing, particularly in cell therapy over there. So when I see, the title of our session today about operating strategy, there's not much options that I can have with such a small team, but I actually realized that they are incredibly resilient and incredibly good at maximizing every little thing that they do on a day-to-day basis, and when I see the cost of operation that we have, I kind of feel really comfortable that when we're going to scale, if we continue to maintain that same mindset, we will be able to be very, very lean and very efficient, which is, it's a good thing to have, particularly when you grow, where you have a tendency of maybe becoming complacent a little bit. So the mindset is there, and I think that's what matters.
Devon, tell us about Garuda.
Sure. So we are 68 FT company. We have 4 sites in US, 2 in Cambridge, 1 in Natick, and now we just expanded footprint in Watertown in partnership with Landmark Bio. We just signed a lease in Rome, Italy. We are building our clinical operations there. And I think while we are expanding footprint, we're also making sure we don't overbuild, we don't overspend. And we don't have unlimited amount of money. And we've been very careful about how to recycle our expertise, our emotions, and our ask from ourselves, from our investors, to make sure we deliver based on money what we have, to a point where others feel comfortable investing us again. And it's all about, again, I'm a first-time CEO, but I'm operating a company more like mom and pop show. People hate me. Every vendor talk to me. They think this guy is the cheapest guy I ever met. But there's nothing wrong with that, right? I think our cost of capital is so high, And I'm glad both of you have positive experience with resilience. I'm just going to flag this. Rahul is my neighbor and also my board member. He's a good guy. They mean well, but they all want to help. But using their help in a right way, at right time, with the right structure put in place is very important. That's what I learned very in the beginning. So I think so far, I must say, I'm very proud of my team that they have been thoughtful about rolling up their sleeve and not asking for 200, 400 people around us. And they are just they are lucky. They feel lucky that they are part of a big mission, and they're just helping us push through the next goals. And as far as company is concerned, we just received very positive feedback from both FDA and EMA. So we hope to dose a patient hopefully next few quarters, and that's where we are. So our focus has been shifting from early R&D to now manufacturing and eventually into clinical operation and clinical development. And obviously we have a clear line of sight on what needs to get done to get reimbursement put in place for product we are building. So that's something we are, that sort of discipline we are having internally. At the same time, we are conveying it to our partners, our investors, our stakeholders. So hopefully we all come out as a winner.
So if you think about Runway, Runway is basically a function of corporate strategy, right? So you're looking at the number of targets you're going after, what stage of discovery and development you're in, what team you need, what are you going to do externally versus internally. For example, am I going to go CDMO? Am I going to go build my own manufacturing capabilities and capacities? It's a really complex challenge, right? How many targets? How long should we take? What milestone does that runway get us to? I think Raphael and Devana, you guys have had an experience of actually being founders of these companies and thinking about that from the initial idea of the company to figuring out, okay, what are the milestones I have to prove? Who should I go talk to for the funding? And what are they going to want to see? And what's the best way of growing that? And you're at the stage of doing that right at the beginning right now. You've now done that and scaled the beginning of the business. What was that process? I know we've actually had a chance to talk about this many times, and it's a fascinating conversation. Going from that academic mindset to building this company, what was that process you used to figure out, okay, what do I need to show? What do I need to build? And then what are the steps I have to go through to figure out my resources and the cost for all these things?
No, I think that, thanks for asking that pointed question. I think one thing, maybe a bold thing I did when I started a company was when people want to invest in 2021, we all know it was, raising money is not difficult, but it was not that difficult in 2021. So there was access to capital, and a lot of people want to invest money. And instead of just taking any cash, we asked them, tell me what success look like in your mind for Garuda. And I want to make sure how far you're in your fund cycle and how soon you want money back, what's your ROI look like. And if I don't have clarity that, if they're investing out of the fund in a late stage, they're going to up my neck the rest of my life. That's the last thing going to happen. So, some investors didn't like that question. They were like, who are you to ask that question? And, was the right thing to do? I think so, in this environment. I think it's very easy to get impressed by these investors in first call when they say, $2 billion in dry powder, we invest in early stage to late stage. And then you ask them, tell us which company you stayed through the late stage versus you came in the late stage. And don't justify that you become a late stage investor because you just invested once it went commercial. So I think picking up their pattern behavior is very important. And because they set up a tone, my board sets up a tone for me, how I'm build the company. Am I building as if like pump and dump, that built for 3 years to sell, or I'm building it to bring it to patient? Because often the time, I'm sure, I think this is, what I'm telling is not new to any of you. I'm just vocalizing your emotion and your feelings, right? I think when we are thinking from the commercial mindset, that what it's going to take to get reimbursed, which market we are targeting, what the price tag should be, and building that discipline from the front that my COGS cannot go beyond that. And for us to maintain that COGS, we also have to know what cost of development is going to look like and how I'm going to raise that capital from home, which kind of investors. I think that's where we spend a lot of time.
That capital, the cycle, how
Yes.
long it'll actually take us realistically to get there.
Get there. So I think we just reverse engineered from that sort of end in mind. And that required a lot of discussion. And a lot of people were just telling me, I'm burning a lot of bridges, don't do that. And I'm like, if I'm a failed CEO, I won't have any job. So either do it right, and if it doesn't work out, I knew I did to myself. And so far I'm very lucky to have very strong board, people who really mean well, been around for 40 plus years. They have seen all sort of phases in funding cycle, and they've been keeping me honest. So it's like we are feeding each other, and that's been very, I would say, productive relationship so far.
Finding the right partners and having them hold you accountable,
Yes.
and making sure they're aligned on the actual right outcomes
Yes.
for the business.
I think you set up a tone from the top. So people, we all have bosses, right? We have board members as our boss, board members have their LP as their boss, and LPs have their wives as the boss, right? So we all have bosses. So I think making sure we know what their goals are, conveying that goals to our employees, and telling them from the day one. I think getting interviewed at Garuda is not easy because we've been very direct that this is how the life is going to look like at Garuda. If you are successful, if you are committed, if you want to be successful and if you are committed, then please join the company. Otherwise, please do not come. And not everybody likes it. But why lie? Why say something which everybody want to hear and then do bait and switch? It's just not fair to employees. It's just not fair to employer. So sometimes that too much directness helps run the company smoothly. Not sure it's the ideal thing to do in every environment. We can have debate about it some other time. But in this financial environment, we've been lucky.
Rafael?
Yeah, well, I actually come from a very different angle because I actually get lucky in my career. As I was mentioning, some of my roles when I was in big pharma, when I was in leading, for example, pipeline assets, my job was to map out how we're going to go from, let's say we're starting phase one, how we're going to go to all the way to commercialization, what is it going to cost, what are going to be the milestones, how much money we expect to make, and how much the manufacturing and all this is going to cost. So I had, of course, teams of people working with me, but it gave me that structure and that mindset that completed with some work that I did in corporate strategy after when I was at Celgene at BMS, having the privilege again to work by the side of big leaders, understanding decision process, governance, all these aspects. And even in a very small company, actually, you apply that immediately. It's not over-processing thing, it's just putting some structure that's gonna help everybody. And I would generally see particularly science teams because they wanna follow the science, they're gonna go right and left, and you need to bring that back to say, remember, this is what, like you said, this is what good look like. This is what we wanna do, and that has to be the target. We have to go for that and then map out all the way towards that successful outcome. And when I started and killed, I remember my two co-founders, both of them looking at me on one of the first meetings where I was showing them, this is the plan for the next 5 years. And they were like, he said, you have a 5-year plan? I say, yeah, I have. I say, we're going to have a product at some point, and it's going to cost a certain amount of money, and we're going to have to, that product is going to have to pass a certain amount of threshold to be viable. And they say, and you have all the financing? I say, yeah, I have a 5-year P&L, which is in the air, of course, it's going to change, but it gives some direction. It gives some kind of guardrail of where you want to go. And you're not going in the dark. And they say, like, we never thought that we would have something that clear. I say, well, we better. It's already difficult enough to develop drugs if you don't have a clear path. You know you're going to go all around it. but you need to know what's the direction. And so I always try, I think my job, besides building the company, is really to help them maintaining that direction and saying, okay, you give me the evidence from the science side, confirming that we're on the right path. If what you give me is telling us, hey, we need to adjust or pivot, we will, but at least we have a very clear path forward. And I think it's important for the team, whether it's a small or a big team, that they understand exactly where we're going. And I got privileged because I got trained like this, but I also meet a lot of peer CEOs that are just starting a business and don't necessarily have that experience, either because they are younger in their career. And what we take for granted, I realize maybe not others will have that same experience. So I actually always want to also spend time discussing with my peers to try to say, hey, is there a way I can help you at some point? Not that I know better than you, but I have a little bit of experience. I can eventually help you, and then you clean your way up.
Well, that's a very different type of experience being a founder, CEO, than coming in after an organization was founded. You came in after biopharma was founded by some of the investors originally as the initial management team. And in some ways, coming into an already established strategy and plan and direction is really hard, because you have to go in and figure out if it's the right strategy and plan, and then you have to make it your own and lead from it, right? So what is that experience like?
And so I was actually very fortunate in that, so Longwood founded the company, and David Steinberg, partner at Longwood, was the person who started to build the team. And I came in, I think, maybe I was employee number 12. And I was fortunate in that David was very deliberate in doing what he called pouring the concrete, but not letting it set. And so while there were, some elements of a plan in place when I came in, Rick Morgan, our CSO, came in at about the same time as I did. We were able to take a look and within 30 days go back to the board and say, hey, obviously we think this was an awesome plan, but here's what we're really going to do. And it was different. It was not the same. And the board and Longwood and David were very supportive. And so, I think this question of resource allocation and strategy, they're obviously completely linked, right? I mean, strategy is, at least in my mind, not about being able to draw the beautiful slides that say, hey, I think I know where I'm going. That's part of it. You have to be clear on where you're going and why. But it's those resource allocation decisions that actually form the heart of what I think real strategy is, and either allow you to achieve that strategy or not. And with the company that has the breadth that we potentially can, just given the breadth of the platform, it's been important to approach that from not just the process angle. We certainly have some very strong and I think somewhat unique processes in place, but also from first principles. Right, we have a set of first principles that, if you were to walk around BeBio, I think you'd feel and you'd hear from people. The first and most important of which being what you see when you first come into the building, which is, eyes locked on the patient, every decision, always. Which is, not actually a soft slogan. It's actually a very sharp-edged principle if applied, sort of strictly speaking, right? You scrutinize every dollar that you spend in terms of how does that advance medicines to the patient. You scrutinize every hiring decision and then every employment decision that comes after that in terms of, is this person and is this team operating in the way that gets this medicine or these medicines to patients with the urgency that the patients deserve. And it's a very spoken, very explicit principle when we're having conversations in the company. I think the second principle is around ownership, and that then requires transparency. So we are a ridiculously transparent company. The day when we become public, it's going to actually be a huge adjustment for us because of the level of transparency that we have in the company. To give you an example, after every board meeting, we go in and present to the entire company the exact board deck. Nothing is redacted. And we go through the exact conversations that were had at the board, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. And I think what that builds is not only trust, but it also builds a situational awareness. We're asking these now 100 or so people to solve very fundamental problems as we get these medicines to the clinic and beyond, and to do it in the context of the real world. Everybody knows what our cash runway is. Everybody knows our financing strategy. Everybody knows when we make an adjustment to the runway or to the objectives on the runway. Everybody knows the consequence of sandbagging the numbers and also the consequence of being unrealistic in terms of what it's going to take to achieve something. And so the micro decisions that are made along the way actually are informed by as much information as we think people can and should absorb in that complete transparency. And then that's all put into a system where we are the third principle, and this is where it translates into process, is just deep collaboration. There is nothing that we're doing that can actually be solved by a single brain. It's just not who we are. And there's nothing that we do that is so linear that it can be done in this department and then move over to that department. It's just not what we do. I mean, these cell therapies are designed, not discovered. It's a design and engineering problem as much as it is a science and drug development problem. And those rapid design and engineering collaborations are what allows us to succeed. And we have some very specific processes in the company, one which I'll emphasize, which is every week we get together and we have folks who are on the hook for each of our corporate goals, and they get together with the C-suite and we talk about, and that's 4 of us, so it's not a large C-suite, and we talk about where are we with respect to each of these goals. Do you have what you need? And if the answer is, actually, I just got this data and it turns out I'm going to need this that I didn't anticipate, those resources have to come from somewhere. So we have the conversation in the room, on the spot, with the decision makers and with the people from whom the resources will be pulled real time. And we walk out of that room every week, say, okay, this now is the resource allocation plan, not just with respect to money, but with respect to people so that we can get these things achieved. And we've never missed a corporate goal. And I think it's a pleasure to work in that kind of an environment. It's also intense. And people come into it knowing that, and you stay if you love that kind of intensity, and if you don't, there actually are places that have a different set of first principles, have a different set of operating principles, where fit might be better.
So can I add? I want to add something
yeah.
to it, because we have actually a more technical conversation about these aspects, how we want to handle the processes we put around, whatever. I also want to highlight that when we, as CEOs or as leaders, wherever you have your leadership team, kind of work really collaboratively. We are not just building a company from a process standpoint, we're also building a company from a human being standpoint. And I want to bring that always. We have to remember that the patient is the number one priority for everybody. I think it's clear to all of us. But it's also building an ecosystem where people are going to feel that what they're doing has value and that they feel good about it. And that's going to go a long way. When I see the drive, again, I have just 2 full-time scientists, and when I see what they pull off every day, and I go to them and I say, this is really good what you're doing, whatever, and I'm like how can I be more grateful to the work? And they say, you don't need. It's great to work in that small team, and we want to make this successful, and we believe in what we're doing. All that comes on top of the technicality. And it creates the DNA of your company. Mm-hmm. And that some people may not like it. That's fine. They're going to find another one where they're going to be good. And the one that's going to stick to you are going to be the hardcore one that's going to make the company successful. So I always want to try to remind that we are in a world of AI. We are in a world of technology. We are human beings. That's what is the core of what we do, with our plus and minus, with our expertise and our flaws. But that's what makes also, I think, the ride exciting and interesting. So just wanted to point that on top.
So what's interesting about what you said previously is that you guys are looking at this on almost on a weekly basis around where you are in process, and as information is coming towards you that might change where the research or development priorities are, you're in real time shifting those. That's a tremendous amount of work, because you have to estimate the costs of that, you have to estimate the types of teams and functionalities you need, and the competencies you need to be able to do so. You might need to change in infrastructure or change in partnership to be able to do so. Are you finding that in this current environment that you're having more frequent, obviously in weekly is quite frequent, but for the rest of you, more frequent conversations around planning and progress and direction? Some organizations do this once a year, right? Some organizations do this twice a year or once a quarter. How are you thinking about that for your organization, Devon?
So, each organization has their own runway, their discipline, their culture, and their own philosophy, how they want to operate. I think going back to Joanne's point, ownership is important. And we go to our team and we tell them, this is all we have. I wish I had more money, but this is all we have. And can you make it happen? I understand in your previous company, you had 200 employees, but I only have 10 for you. Can you make it happen? It's a dialogue, it's a partnership. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't go well, right? And that comes with the Boston ecosystem. Some would say, I don't want to work in small company where I don't have enough resources. And we tell them, we're not crazy. There is no money out there for cell and gene therapy companies. Any cell therapy company in a preclinical stage, if we do not deliver in next 2 years, this field is going to shrink more and more. So it's onus is on us who are still surviving and thriving to deliver and live up to that expectation people have put, set up for us. So, and that has to percolate through the whole company. And people need to know that every time you waste a medium, a 15-liter bag, it's a, waste. And that could be somebody's salary for a year. And we can't make those wasteful choices. At the same time, I think we also learned, this is my own growth or maturity building up in this role. I also learned there are things you can control, there are things you cannot control. The things you cannot control, all you can do is build the redundancy, where you have plan A, plan B, plan C. And sometimes, I believe most of the vendors mean well on a first date, then the contracts are signed, and something happens. All vendors work in supply and demand kind of mechanics, right? Sometimes there is too much supply, there is too much demand. And we just learned we can't depend on one vendor. We need to have same test need to be able to done with 3 different vendors. So in case one vendor has layoff or change in priorities or whatnot, my timelines are not delayed, right? It does cost extra money, but that's where we are buying insurance. So I'm sure, like Garuda, many of you will be going through budget session at board meeting in the next quarter or so. And this time we have a separate bucket of redundancy. And that's a discussion we're having with the board. Don't tell us where to cut what we already have. Tell us where to cut, where we have redundancy put in place for all the paranoia we have around vendor, relationship or not. And that's a very difficult conversation. And that decision we make as a board together, and then we live up to it.
Yeah, there are 2 things that I actually, when I listen to this exchange that we're having, that for me is part of my, I would not say day-to-day routine, but it's constantly what I'm trying to do with my team, is you need to always take decisions. If you don't, you paralyze your business, you paralyze everything. And sometimes you take wrong decisions. It can happen. But it doesn't matter, because you know how to take the next one, and you always be on the move. And if a decision was not the right one, you identify, you correct, and you decide again to move to the next step. So I always tell, particularly my team, say one day you're going to have a larger team under you. What you need to always be able is to make the call. Someone needs to make the call and move. And the second point is we always have to have, and I heard you mentioning that, we need options. We cannot go with one thing and say, oh, that's it, we have to do this, nothing else. Oh, always have in your back pocket a couple of other options that may happen considering the context or considering how your data is coming and all this, but always ensure that you're not running on one lane. You have different ones that can be activated at any given time, and you have identified them. You may have not fleshed them completely, but you know that you have options. And I hate when I don't have options. I feel uncomfortable, and I feel like I'm just forcing something that it may not be the right thing. Having options can also sometimes just confirm that you are doing the right thing because the other option is not a good one. Right? It's always that I try to bring into the conversation with my team and make them thinking that way, so we never get surprised. I think it's one of the...
Traditionally, optionality and flexibility costs money, right? The challenge is, how do you balance the availability of optionality with the cash runway in an environment where the guardrails are really closing in on companies, right? I think 4 years ago, you could raise more money at an easier term sheet and have more available capital. So if you made most of your milestoners okay, you're still going to get your next round of funding. Today, even after hitting your milestone, you're not necessarily guaranteed to make your next round of funding, right? In this environment. And so with that tightening of the belt that everyone's having to go through and trying to elongate their runways, are there decisions you guys have made in the last couple of years that you wish was different, or what would you change? If you had a magic wand, what would you change based on what you know today versus decisions that were made 2 years ago?
Can I say something?
Please.
So I think many of us have same problem, what you just mentioned, right? Trying to have optionality, it costs more money, our runway is tight, we don't have enough money, and how do you balance both? I think what I learned is, at least at Garuda, we spend $300,000 a day. That's my burn rate. So if my ship is not moving for one day, that much money went down. So the way we are thinking is, if one test get delayed by 40 days, is a significant amount of loss in my system, and how much I need to invest to build the redundancy that will avoid that sort of setback in my company. So every time we talk to vendors, we just tell them, traditionally you sell it for $10,000, but if you don't deliver on time, if your timeline, if it's no back order or whatever, and it's going to delay my timelines by 25 days. So I think I make that business decision, how much I'm willing to pay extra to be in the front in the line. Some vendors like it, some vendors are immune to whatever we throw at them. And I think in the end, our job is to do the best we can to save days, save hours, save minutes, wherever we can. And partly it's not just governed by, in my mind, cash runway. It's also governed by patient's pain. Because in our case, we try to build off-the-shelf hematopoietic stem cell, which actually cures patients who are dying. So think about somebody on the other side who is waiting to find bone marrow donor, and that person, every minute is valuable. So sooner we get to them, faster we will have revenue. Sooner we get to them, more lives we would save, and sooner we get to them, more money we would save. And that's what we tell to our employees. That's what we tell to our vendors, that we are all in together, and we hope we become a successful example for them to go back to their employees and for us to go back to our employees to make the relationship work.
So in that environment, like your point is, the more time you waste, the more delays you have, the macro effect to your business is just a loss of capital, right? Because that you don't get back that burn rate that you're going through, which means that you have less time to go develop, less time to discover, less time to hit your milestone in the back end.
Anything on critical path, if it delays by 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, it used to be normal in previous life, not anymore. That 4 days delays is $1.2 million loss in my system, because that's how long it's going to take me to get to patient. and that's what's going to dictate my next funding cycle. So we just can't tolerate that, right?
But in that mentality, are there things you guys would change? Whether it's size of organization, certain partnerships, direction, or number of assets you're working on?
So, at least for us, a couple thoughts I'd offer. One is, I think the primary urgency was, always will be the urgency driven by the patient need. And I think that's a constant, and I think it's independent of the state of the markets. I think what these markets do is they shine a very bright light on the impact of decisions, both with respect to capital utilization, and then also with respect to, frankly, the use of the more precious currency, which is time. And that hooks into burn rate. It also hooks into just overall mission, objective, and ability to make an impact. And so I don't think that these markets fundamentally shift what is the most important driver of urgency. That being said, I think the answer to the concrete and practical question that you're asking, at least for us, probably exists in a two-part framework. One is, did we adjust what we were going to do? And the answer to that is yes, we did. So when we started out, we raised our Series B and closed it. So it's $130 million, led by Arch, closed in March of 2022. So at that point, the markets had already started to become very challenging. But we raised it on a plan that had 2 lead assets, one of which was on the verge of the clinic but not in the clinic, and then a very large pipeline, because again, the fundamental platform behind this is broad and quite modular. And as the market started to unfold, and frankly, as data started to unfold, we realized 2 things. One is our asset that was fastest to the clinic was actually not our preferred asset in terms of being first to the clinic. And so we wanted to create space for ourselves for that first asset to get to the clinic. And then secondly, as we were thinking forward to raising the Series C, we realized that having it in the clinic was going to be important. So we wanted to bring it beyond sort of that knocking on the door of the clinic to, we want it in the clinic. And so we adjusted the plan, and what we adjusted was the size of the pipeline. So the what did change, both in terms of getting that initial asset further, having a different asset, and that's not because of the market. That was because the data was so compelling on that asset, and then a pipeline that frankly went from 10 to 5. So still not shrinking down to a single asset company. And those 5 are very carefully chosen to represent areas that when they work, they open large areas of therapeutic space. So the what changed. The how for us, and I'd actually track back to an observation that you made a few minutes ago. So it is certainly true that most of us do strategic planning once a year, and that's true at BBio as well. So the what is set every year. Now, if something happens in science, obviously that might need to be reset, but those corporate goals, if you will, they don't change on a weekly basis. What does happen on a weekly basis is that resource allocation process, because science, particularly when you're doing the unprecedented, right, which is what our companies are about. It's about doing the unprecedented, the never been done before. And so that means Lady Science sits there with her deck of cards and deals them to you on a daily basis. And your job is to look at those cards and say, okay, what does that mean? And how do I adjust my how? Because anybody who thinks that they can plan a year's worth of how in innovative science, I think is naive. And at least our experience would be it can't be done. And so I think in terms of the how, that actually hasn't fundamentally changed for us in this market. It's just that the consequences of these decisions that we make, both the big ones, but also just the thousands of small decisions that are made, in rooms that don't always involve the senior people, right? The cumulative effect of that is just much quicker to see and much easier. There's a light that is shined on the how. And Look, I'd love to go back to a market where, my money tree was in the backyard and I could go and pluck the money when I needed it. But honestly, I think this market is making us smarter and better as an industry.
It's more discipline. I mean, it used to be, so just to give some context, at Smart Labs, we work with hundreds of companies at different stages who work off of our platform based in Boston and in California. So we have thousands of scientists working on hundreds of programs at any given time. What's interesting is that a lot of earlier companies, especially in the beginning of cell and gene therapies, we observed were building massive competencies. They were building teams that were outsized for their drug pipelines because the goal was to create, first-in-class competencies at each stage of discovery and development of that asset, because they thought that they were going to be bought not because the asset was in the clinic, not because they were, of that lead, but because of that platform development and the ability to have an engine. And it worked out really well for some companies. But in general, you'd see these organizations go from, 5 people, 10 people, to 300, 400 people in the span of, 3 years, 4 years. And I think that entire mentality has changed, right? Now it's much more of you need to have path to eventual revenue, an actual product that is sellable, and there are a larger number of people who have capabilities of developing allogeneic therapies and gene therapies, and we hope they all succeed. But that uniqueness of building that platform is de-emphasized, is what we're seeing, and the focus on what do you really need for the specific plan you have to get there, and how do you resource allocate that with teams, sizing, and what kind of infrastructure do they need? What do you do in-house versus external? What do you have to be proprietary, and what can you partner in? I think that entire mentality has really shifted in the last couple of years, and really the last year and a half in many cases.
I think one, if I may.
Yeah.
We speak with, I'm sure we all do, all kind of investors. And perception they have built and the anxiety they have built over the last 2 years is cell therapy costs a lot of money. There are a lot of great ideas. These great ideas are not scalable when it comes to manufacturing operations. If you manufacture it, regulators hate it. If you figure out how to go through regulatory eyes or lens, there's clinical uncertainties. Nobody knows what dose look like, what cell look like, what patient look like. Then you're going to get the most difficult refractory patient for ethical reasons. And if that works, there's no commercial path, right? And we all thought that we can simply go to payers and tell them, you pay us $3 million per patient dose because we spend so much money building this drug. You owe it to us. So I think we as an industry or field need to think twice how we cut the cost at every step in the way. Keep the cost of development low. And if we demonstrate that to investor, we all have to accept that it's going to cost some money to get to a certain point. But if we somehow demonstrate some successful examples to investors that this can get done with less money, and there are some green shoots out there, and this will actually get reimbursed, then people are going to come back to cell and gene therapy. And I think that's all. Hopefully, we all can do it together and not go to investors and say, if you want manufacturing done, you gotta give me $500 million. If you want to give me clinical trial get done, you gotta give me another $250 million. That's just not going to happen, right? And I'm not sure if you guys have other investors who are willing to pay for it. Give me their names. But and I think I just started the conversation with that. First 30 minutes, we are spending time on apology statement. No, we are not like other cell therapy company. Why we have to do that? Why we not spending time showing them what science we're trying to build here, right? So hopefully, we all can come together and find a way to change the narrative around cell therapy. Companies are expensive to run, expensive to build, and expensive to bring it to patient. And I think if that's changed, then everything else is going to change down the line.
Yeah, interestingly, we are just launching our seed round, and we claim that we're going to do with the 15 million seed, we're going to go for an IND. And I have investors saying, this is not enough
anymore.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm like, well, if you want to give me 25, I'll do it with 25. But I actually think we are shifting that mindset. The difference today compared to even 5 years ago is the amount of knowledge that we have acquired in the field of cell therapy. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of things that are done very well by many potential partners. Look at them, engage them with you, and build more synergies in your plan forward so you can at some point do significant cost saving. And yes, of course, it means that you're going to have to partner. It means that you're going to have to give away some of your ownership. That's okay. At the end of the day, if we are successful, you're going to have a good turnaround. You're going to have a good outcome, and we're going to bring a new therapy to patients, which we have. We keep repeating this. It sounds obvious, but sometimes when you have those conversations, particularly with investors, it's so about the money that you forget why we're doing this. And I really think today we can do much better on our operations with the extreme great knowledge that we have to, I would not say cut corners, but go much more focused and straightforward and not build teams of 25 people when you can do it with 10. And I recently had a deep conversation with my two co-founders, and I said, okay, it was simple. I said, tell me how many people you need for the next 9 months to deliver that specific milestone that we identified. And then, so they came back to me, and I said, okay, you said you need 12 people. I'm going to give you 8. And they said, but no, I need 12. I said, no, you don't. And I'm going to show you why. And then we work backwards together, and they say, well, we can do it with 8. I say, you can do it with 8. If we have the capital to have more, we will. But go with this, and you're going to see that you're going to deliver.
I mean, even if you have the capital to do more, you should still
You don't have to,
Yeah,
exactly, right?
And I think that's an important point, which is, I mean, in the end, so much of these decisions around how do you build your workforce, both within your walls as well as through partnerships, because that is all part of the workforce, I think starts with the first principle around, I want the best person-team organization against this part of the problem as I can get. And in cell therapy, to points that have been made, right, we have built as an industry a set of capabilities that don't have to now always reside in the companies themselves. And so what at least we find as we forward integrated, at each step of that forward integration, sort of the tip of that spear has always been a blend of folks that are internal, but then situating ourselves with the right partnerships, consultants, vendors, to be able to then push into the next part of integration. I mean, I think we strongly believe that workforce and team are not variable expenses, right? They are your team. And it is true that sometimes changes in strategy can force a change with respect to team, but not because it's a variable expense. And so looking at every hire that comes in and saying, is this the best person for a job that only we can do at the level that we need it done, is something that at least is just a core principle for us.
I think when you mentioned like the variable, coming from large pharma, there were days where I had the feeling that workforce was a variable on the P&L. And it's very frustrating and very disappointing, I would say. That's the way it is, it's the way it is. At least we can try to set up a different approach and use our teams as true assets of the company. Think twice, like you said. Don't hire someone because you said, I need someone in that job. No, hire the person that's gonna make the job the best possible way, and then realize that you're going to have that person for years. Sometime, you move, when you are a research company, you become a clinical company, it's already a very different company. But the people that are in research, what are you going to do? You're going to dump them? No. So you need to be sure that when you hire them, you have a future that goes beyond just that one asset that you're developing or that one program, what's going to be next. So you don't need to do a big mutation when you go to clinic. And the same way it goes when you go to commercial. It's almost 3 companies in one when we do a biotech. So that's where we have to always put that in consideration and have, at the end, this is how it's going to look. We're back to the beginning of our conversation. What success look like? Success is this. And we're going to have an evolution, and how we be sure that the people that were at the beginning can still be in that picture at the end, without having to get rid of them at some point, which will be terrible, loss of experience and expertise.
So I have a different perspective on this. I think that it really depends on how do you prove that the technology of the company is valuable and viable. And I think that if you think about carrying all of the competencies indefinitely forward, right? I built a great discovery team, I built a great development team, a great process development team, we have a great analytical chemistry team. If you do that, then your organization, as you build it long term, only gets bigger and bigger, regardless of the fact that you have to go and develop new and new competencies for every cycle. So if you think about this as a 10-year cycle, and you say, I want to get 2 drugs all the way through to phase 2 in that 10-year cycle and get out, then you're going to find the burden rate you're hitting in years 5, 6, 7, 8 in that process is exponentially increasing. So what we've seen a lot of organizations is having to shift that back and say, okay, like, are we going to have the same size of discovery engine? Are we going to bring back down to a core team so we keep those key competencies, but then have to make the hard decision of letting go?
But some people can evolve also. Sorry, some people can evolve.
Absolutely.
They can change. I mean, they can evolve in that job.
It's true, and I think also, you know, as is true with so many things, it depends on what problem you're trying to solve as an organization. If you know that your 10-year goal is I'm going to get 2 programs into the clinic up through phase X, then the way in which team is going to work is a specific thing, right? I think for a company like ours, where that is not our goal, right? Our goal is to use this fundamental platform as a product engine, and to drive an entirely new class of medicines into the clinic across indications, right? Then being, you know, thoughtful about what your research team needs to look like is important, but that engine continues to be valuable over time. Again, there can be shifts in strategy. If our strategy were not that, if we became, hey, now what we really want to do is to get 2 things into the clinic, right? That's an entirely different exercise, and, you know, haven't done the thought exercise on how do you build team within that. But at least for us, you know, we believe when we bring somebody on as a full-time or as an employee of the company, that is not a variable expense at that point. And at least the plan that we've got, we feel very confident that we can say that.
We're almost out of time over here. It may make sense to provide the audience a chance for 1 or 2 questions. Any questions from the audience? Please.
Not sure if there's a microphone, but I'll try and speak up. So you mentioned the potential for cost savings through partnerships, and I think that makes a lot of sense, but with the best will in the world, you own your challenges 100%. Your partner will be partnering with a number of different groups. You're only one of those groups. So they may only own your challenges 25%. How do you best work with your partners to incentivize them to have as much ownership in their challenges as you do?
Actually, both of you actually have very interesting answers for that. So maybe Joanne, if you want to start, and then Devon, giving you a chance to talk about your experiences as well.
Sure, I think it's an awesome question, and clearly there's no one answer. I think some of it for us comes through the way in which we structure our partnerships. I think I gave the example of the resilience deal, which is structured specifically to make sure that the strategic engagement and the operational engagement is put against very aligned incentives. I think the second piece that we spend a lot of time on is developing the relationships. We spend a lot of time with our partners, not only here's what we need operationally, but here is why. And the transparency that we use within the company is something that extends into those relationships. And what we find is the more transparent you are, frankly, the more transparent the partnership becomes. And so I don't think there's any secret sauce to it, other than, as is true with any human relationship, it takes time, and it takes trust, and it takes transparency, and it takes solutions orientation.
Do you want it?
I'm sure you all of you experienced this. When we sign a contract, we sign them with generals, and when we deal with that firm, we deal with lieutenants. And there is a different mindset, right? People who are at the bottom of the food chain, they don't care enough about your product as much as the people in the top of the food chain care about our product. So I think you're right. How to find incentive that they care about, and they really want to be committed to your product and your process, And I think what we try to do is try to, have a heart-to-heart chat with them, and we interview them up front. Don't tell me, we just don't want to talk to CEO. We also want to talk to, people on the floor, and then understand their reward and a risk structure, right? And do they actually care? And we can literally pick it up in first 5 minutes of conversation, how much eye contact they have, or how much of the handshake, they're going to offer it to us or not. And I think those soft cues sets up the tone for the relationship from the beginning. And once we make commitment, we are committed, right? It's like Indian marriage. You just in it, right? And try to focus on, what need to happen. So, try to have frequent chat, try to, build family-like bond, and because in the end, we all are human. We all have emotion. And sometimes doesn't matter how much money we offer these people. That does not percolate through to these floor managers, right? And it might stay with the CEOs. So, we try to offer stock incentive, we try to offer cash incentive, we try to take them out for dinner, we try to invite them for our, company events, we try to offer them gadgets, we try to invite them over town hall meetings, so they know where the company is going, where their time and emotional investment is playing out or not. That's all we can do. These are things we can control, right?
I'll just add one quick thing: communicate. I learned the biggest thing I learned in my 26 years in this business. If you don't communicate properly, and communicate is two ways. It's not me telling you; it's both ways. There's an emitter and receptor. If you communicate, you increase significantly the odds of success. If you don't, you're going to kill the project. You're going to kill the company. That's just.
Well, with that, we're over our time.